If you're listening to this, it's estimated you'll spend roughly 90,000 hours working in your lifetime. That's 1/3 of your entire life. If you're anything like me, you've probably asked, what am I working for? Maybe you've thought about quitting your job, changing careers, altering your relationship to work, or trying not to let your work rule your life. And if that's the case, this series is for you. Hey there, I'm Chad Miles, and welcome to my new mini-series on a Level Deeper podcast. What are we working for? My friend, if you think about work and the role it plays in your life and the role that you want it to play in your life, then this series, and more specifically, this episode, is for you. Over the next few weeks in this series, you'll hear conversations with experts, coaches, and everyday people who share their stories and perspectives on work. Through this series, my hope is that you'll gain new insights, new questions, and new ways of thinking about your relationship to work so that you can create a work life, and more importantly, a life that's meaningful to you. And so today, we're setting the stage for this series by exploring the modern human relationship to work. I mean, I don't know about you, but I find myself often struggling to separate myself from my work, and work seems like such a massive part of my life. I mean, it is, after all. So if we're going to spend roughly 1/3 of our lives working, how do we make the most of it? Well, for me, I think exploring that question starts with looking back and examining, how did we get here in the first place? Why does it seem like this relationship to work is a universal thing that we seem to be weighing right now and struggling with? So to kick off this series, I invited career coach Gina Marotta on the show to talk about just that. Gina, thank you so much for joining me on the show. I'm really excited to chat about work with you. And before we do that, go ahead and fill us in on what you do professionally.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you. And my hope in this conversation today is to help support you in knowing, are you where you want to be, or is there some new door you want to open? And this is really an inquiry that a lot of people come to me to as a career coach. And I've been starting to play around with, instead of using the word career, the word vocation. Vocation to me means something deeper. It's about, I have this calling in the world, a purpose in the world, and I am serving that. And that experience is very fulfilling, joyful. It actually feels easeful, where we have had work situations feel hard and challenging and stressful. And so the work I do in the world is helping people to find what that is, and to get in harmony with that job, that career, that vocation. On the other side, I actually also help companies create harmonious teams, because part of the problem of why individuals are struggling in their career paths is the way companies have set up employment. And it's been really structured around, okay, I've got all these things we've got to get done. Let's, financially, it makes sense to chunk all this with this one person. And unfortunately, they're usually job descriptions call for very different gifts that one person may not hold all of. And I believe the future of work is about each of us focusing inside our genius zones. So whether I'm working with an individual or a company, it's about honing in on individual genius, natural talent, and then shaping a career around that, which gives you all the things I started with: the fulfillment, the sense of purpose, and just a real connection to like thriving in life.
I resonate so much as you say vocation. That feels like what I want to create in my life. That feels like what I want, the role that I want my work to fulfill in my life. I want it to bring meaning. I want it to be something that feels purposeful, that feels intentional. It seems like there's more of a shift in our society, that people are seeking that more.
Yes.
Where do you see the cause of this shift coming from?
So, our education system was designed and funded by the Rockefeller family to set up. Now, there's some good intentions in there, I'm sure, to help our society be forwarded. But really, the idea wasn't about the individual. The idea was about creating corporate workers, people that had a training that could then translate into working inside a certain structure of businesses. And while that has forwarded society in many ways, What it has neglected is, I think, the big thing everybody's looking for now. We are all born with natural gifts that want to be expressed. And so, what the conditioning that society has given us, what I would say is the root cause for a lot of people being dissatisfied, and this was true for myself, is that we're trying to fit into this system that was designed to really serve those with a lot of money who have created these businesses that want workers. Yet, we are a whole society and a whole humanity that if we listen to our own gifts and our own selves, there's ways that we're meant to thrive in a harmony of service to all. And so when people are looking for more meaning, they are looking to reconnect to themselves and what their natural gifts are, because they've actually been turned away to some degree from who they really are to fit into the system. This was very true for me. I began my career as a lawyer, right? Fit into the system. In my family, blue collar family, that would be like the epitome of like, you've taken our family to the next level. You have status, you have security. And that's so much of how we are guided in the education system, is for that security. And then for many of us, we go through and we achieve that status or that security. And then we say, wait, am I really happy though? Am I really helping anyone? And what's going on is we're serving this system instead of what might feel like serving the whole of humanity. And so we want that purpose. We want that connection.
Why now? I mean, it's not necessarily that this is, like a 2024 thing, but from my perspective, this has been a shift over the last decade or so where I think people are revisiting this whole relationship with their work. And it feels like, I don't know, kind of pulling back the curtain and being like, wait a minute, what is going on here and why? So why now? Why is now the time when we are thinking more deeply about work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can offer some theories, but what do I know? I don't know. But so I have been for, let's say 20-ish years, I have been following the spiritual movement of like yogis. I study the sacred feminine. So I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about like those who might look to astrology and that's giving guidance to what's happening in the world and how things are shifting. So in my sphere where I've been studying these things, it has been predicted. It has been predicted that there would be a great awakening in humanity where we would shift in our energy, more moving towards serving all, towards a state of harmony, and that it's part of our evolution as humanity. And we operated one way, and that wasn't necessarily bad. It worked for a period of time. It progressed humanity in certain ways, but that like physical progression of like, we have more things, we have warm homes, we have plenty of food, all of those things that have been developed. Now it's like we're developing more on an emotional, spiritual consciousness level, and so now we're wanting different things, we're needing different things. There was a time when people were hungry and they didn't have enough food, and now in many places, not all, but in many places food is plentiful. So what's the next level of our evolution? It's this sense of purpose. It's this sense of being closer to harmony and serving all.
It's a really interesting perspective, and I think it, so it's almost like we've evolved as humans, and now it's not necessarily it's not the case in all places in the world, but in some civilizations, we're not having to work on a daily basis in order to meet some of our basic needs, in order to survive. And so now we're shifting to, well, now I've got more maybe energy or time. Let's think about this whole purpose thing. Let's think about this whole happiness thing, and let's start piecing that equation together.
Yes, yes. And, some would say, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm tapping into resources who are intellectual and have studied and researched things. But some would say we actually do have enough for everybody in terms of the food we can produce. Like everybody could be fed, but we just don't distribute things that way. And so if we are all getting more connected to harmony and the service of all, that's going to start to shift the systems. It's going to start to shift. Well, oh, wait, if certain people or places are hoarding, well, we're going to undo those systems and we're going to take care of everybody and we're going to create a sense of harmony. And so something like that does not happen overnight. But if people are more connected to purpose and just a sense of why am I here, we're going to care about things like that. Whereas before, if we're just trying to survive, it's like I just need to take care of me and my family and make sure we're okay. But now we can expand that into caring for the many.
I wanted to ask you about identity and how this plays into people's relationship with work. I find myself being someone who I can struggle separating my identity as a person, as a human, my identity as Chad, the individual, from the work that I do and maybe the value that I provide for others or for clients. I'm curious if you have perspective on if you see that often in your coaching where people have such an ingrained identity to the work that they do, whether it be for themselves or for a company or a job title or position, and why that is that it seems like at times we can have such an ingrained identity, I'm going to call it issue, with
Yes.
our work.
Yes. I'm going to give you an answer. I'm not saying it's the answer.
Perfect.
So, what comes forward for me is at this time in the world, we are very identified with masculine energy over feminine energy. Brief, like, what's the difference? I can explain. Our masculine side is our doing, giving side. It's what, we can exert into the world. And it's very much how the professional world has been created. It's you set a goal, you set a strategy, you take action, you make something happen. And that is what the masculine or yang energy in like Chinese wisdom is about. And men and women, by the way, have both. Okay. The feminine energy is more about receiving in our state of being. And so the feminine power is much more, again, in both men and women about just our presence, and holding a space of like love and goodness. Nurturing is very much known as a feminine quality. Inside our feminine energy, this is where our intuition comes from because it's about being receptive. And so when we're receptive, we're open to the universe giving us the answers. We're not asserting and trying to think it out intellectually, which the masculine does. And so this over identification with work, I would say in part is over identification with the masculine, which is about what I do is what defines me. And in the feminine, it also is more like, well, who I be and how I care for people is the essence of me. And we're out of balance in that right now. And there is this surge of feminine leadership coming forward in professional environments that I think is starting to create balance. Some of the men I'm working with are telling me how they really prefer working for women leaders because they know how to bring a balance into the work environment. So I feel like when we're in a state of wholeness, both of those things matter. Who I be with my family, with my friends, the loving expression I get to give in my community, that matters just as much as that I'm contributing in this specific way in my job.
So maybe it's the practice of embracing some of the feminine side that we all have, some of that
Yes,
feminine energy, and finding a more harmonious balance between the two.
that's right. That's what I would say would be really helpful to release some of that strain of over identification with your job title.
Gina, thank you so much for joining me on the show. Thank you for sharing your perspectives. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's been a delight.
Gina will be back in this series to chat with me about answering the question, should I quit my job? So be sure to stay tuned because that episode is coming up. For now, I wanted to continue exploring this relationship to work. So I reached out to friend of the show, Mitchell Martin, to continue that conversation. Mitchell now serves as a men's coach, but that wasn't initially his path. He started out going to school and training to become a chiropractor and living in Tennessee. And he went through an experience of examining his own relationship to work and the role that it played in his life and the life that he wanted to build. Anyway, that process led Mitchell, his wife, and his daughter to move to Puerto Rico and in many ways start a new life. As we talk about in this conversation, Mitchell coaches both men, women, and couples. And this idea of work is something that comes up a lot in the coaching work that he does. So I thought he'd be good to speak on this topic more. Mitchell, thanks for joining me on the show again. Thanks for coming back. I appreciate it. All right, I'm really excited and curious to get some of your perspective on work. And specifically, how have we gotten to this place where it feels like the relationship that so many people have with work is strained? People are struggling with it. When did work become such a big part of our lives?
So for me, this goes all the way back to the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, where industrialization was born. This systematic way of looking at things was born, and it was portrayed to the public that you need to work. You need to work to get a gold watch and retire, right? You need to protect your family. You need to yada, yada, yada. You need to provide. And this is what really took the man out of the house to go work. The birth of the factory worker, it was work, right? And that's what man was told to do. And for me, it starts there, because what did that do? That disconnected the family. The father was no longer around with the son. So then the identity of the man became, I am blank. It went from not being, I am a man, I am a father. It went to, I am that was my dad's job, right? I didn't know what my dad did for, 25 years. So when that happens, there's this massive disconnect between father and son, where the son is then left to his own demise of his own imagination of what he thinks his father does. And most of the time that's negative, filled with shadow, because of the pathological prolonged connection between mother and son, because the mother is now projecting her lack, her wanting from the father onto the son, right? So for me, I wanted to start there and paint that picture, because that was my life. And now fast forward to now, for me, the identification, it's a way to escape the real most important role of being a father and being a man. So now there's this aspect of permission, where in our country is of naval law, maritime law. And what does that mean? It's coded. Everything is coded. We went from the law of the land, where everything was operated via just agreements, right? Man to man agreements, woman to woman agreements. And now we have everything is coded. You need permission to run about the ship. You need permission to drive a car. You need permission to buy land. You need permission to go and help people. You need permission to do everything. So for me, I realized, I went to chiropractic school to get a license to help people, to guide them back home, basically. And you don't need permission. You're a man. You're enough. You're a woman. You're enough. You can fulfill your divine right and be just that, right? So this is completely bursting that whole bubble of, that's true. Like, I've always had this inner authority. Remember, this is about inner authority, which, comes from the creator. I've always had this inner drive that I love helping people, but man, I got to go to school for 4 years to do that. Like, you see how that thought process has been learned. And for me, this is about unlearning all of that and getting back to our roots of following that inner authority, which in our today's society, that's going to go against the grain.
Let's go back to, this shift. So you talked about, okay, the Industrial Revolution, that time. was a big shift because you've got just a different role that at that time in particular, maybe it was a focus on men going to work and their role in the family, their role in the household shifted. And now their role, or maybe their identity, starts to get assigned to, well, I'm supposed to go provide. I'm supposed to go to work. I'm supposed to leave. This is what I do. And that's kind of expanded now over generations, which now I think can be applied to both men and women. And that this is where we are supposed to, this is what we're supposed to go do. We're supposed to go out and work and provide. And is this where we're assigning so much of who we are as people now is to this thing of work, as opposed to the role we play at our homes or in our families?
Abso-freaking-lutely. Where the reverse drives the work. Your internal nucleus was actually always seen as the most sacred first, and then you step out, where now it's the opposite. So there's a quote from Carl Jung I like to quote all the time is, Western marriages are of the most are the saddest because the man does all the fighting at work. He goes to war, he goes to battle to go sit in his cubicle, and I'm not demeaning any of that work. It's not right, good, bad, right, or wrong. I'm stating he goes to battle. You know, he over caffeinates himself and just does his work, and then he comes home drained to give them nothing. You know, where then that starts to be the pleasure of like, oh, I seek that fulfillment of work because I don't know maybe how to fulfill it at home. You know, where I thought back to my dad's dad. He was, he worked in the steel mill, and I remember my dad was like, I don't think my dad ever told me he loved me. And I was like, wow. And it brought me so much perspective to my dad, so much love and grace of like, man, but why? Because he didn't know how. All he did was work. That's what he thought. And now I feel in our aspect of evolution and growth, and when I say evolution, I just mean growth by transmutation, by evolving. Now we start to question that assumption of, well, wait, where did this thought come from? Like, why do I? You know, and it's in that curiosity that you learn of like, oh, wow, like I don't have to just like work my life away, you know, and then it creates a whole aspect of an avenue of spontaneity, of freedom, which this is really all about freedom. I think for me, that's a big value of mine. And it's being free to do the work that I want to do and be generative and creative in my own way and not be confined to ask for permission to do X, Y, Z. And I think a lot of men fall in that category.
Yeah. I mean, how often does this come up in, so you do coaching work, you work with both men and women, couples. How often does this idea of work and relationship to work, how often does this come up in your coaching work?
Oh, all the time. It's like the main topic of conversation because for me, I work a lot with men in specifically addiction and just cyclical generational patterns that present themselves as overworking, pornography, overeating, alcohol, drugs, sexual addiction, all these things. What a lot of men don't realize and what comes up a lot is all of that urge, all of that feeling that you have and you give it away to something else. That's actually really your purpose. That's actually really your divinity trying to make contact with you to actually fulfill that aspect of your work here on this planet. Right. And of course, the women being as divinely, spiritually connected and intuitive as they are, they're showing that to the man the whole time. But due to a lot of this programming and this way that men have been, I would say, trained to like view women as, oh, they're wrong. I don't trust her. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Then it creates a lot of conflict and resistance where when the man actually really starts to trust his wife and her intuition, then that's when the real magic happens. And that's when the co-creation happens. to where they co-create their life together, rather than like the man is just the paycheck and the woman is just the provider for the kids. So it comes up all the time.
Yeah, I mean, what are some of the most common thought patterns, beliefs,
Oh man,
struggles in relationship to work that you come across?
I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. Time is slipping away from me. I don't feel that I'm worthy of freedom. I'm not enough. Um, I'm afraid I'm going to fail my wife and my kids. So then I, dig my head or I bury my head in the sand in my work. All those like crippling mental, psyche belief patterns that come up. And the man who is by his divine right, the leader from the bottom of the family. So the woman leads from the front via her intuition and connection to spirit. And when the woman leads from the front, she leads from that intuition to then call the man to action, to then come together as one. So I think that answered your question.
What are some of the shifts or ways in which you work with some of your coaching clients to re-examine this relationship with work and put work into a different box in people's life?
I like to go back to childhood, and I like to ask, like, where really it's about a question. This is a question of radical responsibility of, if there were no blockages in your life, what would you do with your creative energy? And that's a question I ask. So simply just, I let them play that out in that question. And then they go of like, man, like, I always love to really divinely help people. I always love to guide people, or I always love to, be of service or some sort of capacity, because for me, this is about play. And there's a quote that in our chiropractic training, we would say, like, work is fun when I'm in the flow, and the flow is fun when I'm in work. So it brought play to work, where work is about play. It's not, work doesn't have to be hard. Remember, we talked about this, a lot last time. Work is fun. Like, look at the work you're doing. It's, depending on how you view it, right? It's like, it's really fun. You're just getting to talk to people all the time, and if, sitting in that divine nature, it's quite beautiful. So I go there a lot. I make it about play, and let's get practical. It's like, you don't have to quit your day job right away. You don't have to put your family in scarcity because you as a man want to, like, follow your divine dream right away. Like, you can be smart about this. You can have a clean cut and have an exit strategy to make sure everyone's copacetic, because that's what I did. Like, I had my title, I had my chiropractic title of being a chiropractor, and we had an exit strategy of, okay, I'm going to leave by this date, and all of this has to happen before we need to leave. And that's what we did, because I wanted to follow my dream of leading people the way that I wanted to lead them, by just being a man and leading from my experience and the continued experiences that I have continued to have. And, getting married and coming into union, and just using my innate gifts that we all have, that we were given to bring more love to the world. So, and what this really boils down to is life is already perfect. The world is already perfect. And people may be thinking, well, like, if it's already perfect, why do we need to, like, bring more love to it if it's already perfect? And it's like, well, it's a good point. But what if you view it as like just a perfect, beautiful song that's like one verse? It's the best song in the world. And that reminds me of, like, the Tenacious D song. It's the greatest song in the world, right? And what we're doing is we're just adding more verses to it. We're just making it more lovely by us actually following our own inner authority, and instead of giving the power away to someone else.
this idea of work being play and bringing play into work, that feels like a very different message or experience than what work traditionally is viewed as. When I look at, you talked about like the Industrial Revolution, and I think that led to this relationship with work where work is not meant to be play. It's not meant to be fun. And it's like the goal in life was to try to work as little as possible, aka get to retirement as quick as possible so that you could exit work and you could be done working. And that was, for many people, I think that was the goal. That was the goal of work to save money, to be able to retire as soon as possible and stop working. That was like the ultimate milestone that you could reach in your life. So it's interesting hearing you bring this idea that work and play can intermix. And I feel like that creates a very different relationship between human and work that is different than what we've been doing for a long time.
Absolutely. That just reminded me of Henry Ford. His factory was so he was so crazy at his factory that all he wanted was work. Like if people would laugh on the line, they got fired. If they were seen having some sort of act of humor, they got fired because they weren't working. That's insane. And so absolutely, bringing play to the workplace, I think, is so pivotal. And it really boils down to like just being radically responsible. Like you have control of your work environment, and you can make it fun. You can, and that's what it's all about, of being responsible, instead of, oh, this is happening to me, of like, I blame my job, I go to my work, I blame yada, yada, yada. It's like, what can I learn from this experience? What is this trying to teach me? And a lot of it's teaching me I need to change my environment. It's teaching me that I have bigger visions and dreams that I want to go pursue. But remember, what happens next? Well, I don't know how. Remember? And then that I don't know how is just an excuse to stay in your comfort. Where, like you said, the goal, right? And look at sports. Every time you make a goal, what happens? The ball drops, the puck drops, the football, the basketball, volleyball, it all drops. So that's what happens when you achieve a goal. It's like, okay, now what? I rescue the damsel in distress, right? I'm the hero. What's next? I don't know. So that message of, let's just do it all fast. Let's just sacrifice our whole life. Let's forget how to play. And then, when I'm done, I'll know how to play. No, then you don't know how to do anything. All you know is work. I've witnessed that a little bit in my dad, honestly. Like, spent 40 years of his life in a factory, high managerial position, and company got bought a couple times, ended up getting fired because he's an old head, right? And the new energy's coming in. And he's like sitting home. And I was like, man, I bet. I was just joking with him. We had our, like, I called him and we both cried. We both got very emotional because I know how much his work means to him and for where he's at. And I was like, man, that grass is about to be looking good. And but he's like he's like back in the force. He's putting out job applications and stuff where, this could be a good time for him to shift and pivot. However, that's all he knows, so it's at the same time showing grace for that, everyone has their own experience too.
As we wrap up this conversation, I'm encouraged by, as you've shared in the work with your clients, like, people are open to re-examining this relationship with work. It's something that I struggle with very much. It seems to be something that a lot of people struggle with. What is my relationship to my work? What do I want it to be? How can I improve it? How can I make it better? That, at least to me, feels encouraging. Those feel like encouraging questions. We're maybe taking a step back and saying, wait a second, the way that we've been doing this for the last, I don't know how many decades, maybe there's something better that we could do. And that seems like a really positive thing. Yes, it can be difficult in the moment. There's a lot of struggle and kind of angst in examining this, but it seems like we're starting to ask some of the right questions.
Yeah. It's this idea of unlearning. And it's maybe there's something that's more useful to this whole thing, to this whole aspect of creation, to creative energy, you know? So absolutely. Yeah. Looking at it in a more of a conscious way. And you have to be conscious in order to view it consciously.
Are there questions, prompts that you might urge someone to consider who might be listening to this, who's thinking about their relationship to their work? They're trying to examine some of the things that we're talking about. They're trying to figure out the role that they want their work to play in their life.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
Where would you lead them to maybe reflect or ponder or question?
I would lead them to reflect on their relationship with their work. So, for example, are they blaming their work for their own, demise? How are they viewing their work in relationship to themselves? Right? Are they looking at it as a grind? Are they putting themselves in the victim role, or like, oh, poor me, I've got to go to work again? What is their relationship with that? And can they take radical responsibility of what is actually trying to be communicated to me by my relationship with work, right? What am I needing to learn from this situation that I have with how I'm feeling about my work, right? And spending time with that question of what do I want? And if there was zero obstacles, what would I really want to be doing with my energy? Just get creative, because if you're not happy in your work, then you have the choice to stay in that, or you can move in the direction that you actually want to go that brings you joy.
It's beautiful. Mitchell, thanks for joining me on the show and sharing some of your perspective. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Chad, thank you.
I can say one thing for certain. These conversations gave me a lot to think about as I reflect on my relationship to my work. Specifically, I'd love to reflect more on this idea between balancing and finding harmony between the different types of energy, masculine and feminine, in life, and finding a balance that feels right for me. I know I'll also be reflecting on this idea that work can involve play, and that those two things maybe could go together. And what would that look like? This week, I encourage you to reflect on some of the same questions. Was there something that was brought up in one of these conversations that made you think a little bit? And maybe you could reflect on that further. Ultimately, I encourage you to think about, what role do you want work to play in your life? And maybe that starts with thinking about, what role does work currently play? And how could it maybe look different? As you think about it looking differently, maybe it raises the question of some of the traditional advice around work that we hear, like follow your passion, or try to turn your passion or hobby into a career. So in the next episode, I chat with a couple of people who went that route and tried it. And they share their experiences, their lessons, and their learnings, and some surprising perspectives on the question, should I turn my passion into my career? Until then, we'll see you next week.